Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people do what they want, when they want. And in today's episode, OP's neighbor, despite repeatedly being told no, chops down OP's 150-year-old tree when she's gone. Oh boy. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. Well, I hope this counts, since it's about a man, but he had big Karen energy. And I wanted to share how you can handle this sort of Karen who calls cops on people for no reason. With that said, my family lives in an upscale neighborhood with a homeowners association. I had just gotten my driver's license, so I got my first car, which was practically a rust bucket, and I drove to a park that's meant to only be shared between people in the neighborhood. I was relaxing in my car when I see a man walk up and take a picture of my license plate, and then a picture of my face through the window, with me putting a hand up. I then saw him walk back and forth in the park and I was weirded out, so I drove to the other corner of the lot. The guy then gets into a truck and he follows me and he parked in the row right behind me. I had overheard enough to realize that he was calling the police on me for no reason. And I know how cops can be if they only have one side of the story. So I called 911, and when they were like, "What's your emergency?" I said in a panicked voice, "I need you to send the police to so-and-so park. I'm alone in the park and there's a big guy following me. He just took a picture of me and now he's calling someone, maybe his buddies. I'm afraid he's gonna try something because he's acting really unstable. I tried to get away from him and he's following me in a truck. He's right behind me right now watching me. I've locked myself in my car. It's an older gray Camry. Tell the police to look for a Camry. I'm afraid to go home because I don't want him knowing where I live." They said they'd dispatch a police car and the cop must have heard both calls and possibly connected the dots. A cop car then showed up and one cop came to speak to me first and I started speaking right away like, "Thank goodness you're here, officer. He's in the truck right behind me. Can you get me out of here without him following me?" And then he said the man thought I was trespassing. I then showed him my license that said I lived in the neighborhood, and I also said that I thought that was a lie on the man's part because he was following me, and I was afraid he was trying to get me alone to do something. The cop went to talk to his partner and then came back to me to say that the man was genuinely worried that I was trespassing, being a thief, and that I'm potentially here to steal from residents. The police said to me that the man told them it was a private park, and that he had seen a strange car in poor condition in the lot, so he called police. I said the car was my first car, it's all I can afford. I also told police that they need to warn him that following a young woman who's alone like that is gonna make her fear for her life, and that he can't keep doing that because it's terrifying. He said he'd talk to him and he let me go. Anyways, long story short, if you ever see someone making nonsense calls to police, trying to target people for acting suspicious, I feel it's fair game to target them back, saying, "Oh my goodness, help, I'm being followed by a suspicious person." Oh man, imagine having police called on you for looking poor and driving a beater in an upscale neighborhood, guys. And honestly, I feel this happens more than we think. With that said, well played by OP. I'm gonna keep that in mind if I ever encounter a creepy stalker Karen. This story happened when I was 20 and worked in McDonald's while at university. I was shy and inexperienced of human nature, and it was my first job in the restaurant industry. McDonald's probably was a bold choice for a girl like me, but despite the humiliation and suffering, I'm glad I chose it because it made me tough. One day, on my second week of working there, I finished my shift at 10 p.m. In the last hour of my shift, I was struggling with giving back change. My cash register mostly consisted of either larger bills or change, which was 5, 10, or 25 cents. At around 9:50 p.m., a guy in his late 30s or early 40s with full business attire walked in. The guy only asked for a small ice cream in a cone. It was $1, and he paid with a $50 bill. I asked him politely if he had a smaller bill as I don't have change to give him. He replied with a simple no. Until that point, there was nothing about him that screamed Karen. I told the guy that I could give him back $40 in 20s, and then told him that I could give him the last $9 in coins since there was no smaller bills in my cash register. The guy let out a very annoyed and rude reply, but I thought it was directed at the situation and not at me. I start counting the $9 of change. Well, I counted wrong, and I accidentally gave him $8.95. I didn't realize it until the guy screams at me, "Hey, this is only $8.95. At that, I immediately reply, "I'm very sorry," and then gave him the last 5 cents. Now I thought that was the end of it, and that's when he starts screaming at me with a bright red face saying, "Did you really think you could get away with stealing from me? You are not going to take my money. Where's your manager?" I just looked up shocked, trying to process what was happening. The guy was screaming so loud, the whole McDonald's went silent and they were staring at us. I then told him, I'm sorry, it was not intentional, I just miscounted the coins. But the guy just kept screaming, "You are not going to scam me. And what the F are these coins? I'm not carrying $9 in coins." Before I could react, he then threw all the coins in his hand right at me, right at my face. I just stood there humiliated, intimidated, with a dozen people staring at me. I could only say, "My register doesn't have $9 in bills." The guy then replied, "I don't give a damn what you have. Get me what I asked. I'm not carrying $9 in change." That's when the manager arrives to my station, and he was a good guy manager, thankfully. He took over the situation, gave the guy his change, and firmly told him that cashiers cannot leave their station and can only handle the money that's in their register, and that it's very unlikely that somebody would steal 5 cents. He dropped his brave screaming attitude now because the manager was a bigger guy. He wasn't a small 20-year-old girl. I just remember walking home crying and shaking. I never saw him again after that. Yeah, some people are freaking horrible, I tell you, especially when it comes to dealing with fast food employees. And having worked fast food when I was 18, I've been there before, guys. Like, I didn't have a handful of coins thrown at my face, but I did have an old man yell at me for like 10 minutes and demand to talk to the manager because I waved at him to get his attention. Ridiculous, right? Like, the dude legit said to me, "Don't you dare wave at me, I'm not your friend." Like, how do you respond to that, right? And this person comments, "I had someone yell at me over 5 cents too. I was working at a Hallmark store and this lady comes up with a few items. She'd calculated all her items to total $8.01. When I rang them up, it came out to be $8.06 and she had a meltdown." The woman then starts yelling how she didn't have sales tax in her home state and that she would not give the state of California sales tax either. And I'm thinking, yeah, it doesn't work that way, lady. The woman made such a big deal about it that the man behind her slammed a nickel onto the counter and he yelled, "Here, now shut the F up." Yeah, again, I think some people just love making big deals out of absolutely nothing. Clearly, some people have nothing better going on in their lives that they try to make others' lives miserable. So this happened during a really hot heat wave last summer. I was walking out to a food store just across my high school to get some Gatorade with 2 of my football teammates after practice. Practice ended at noon, and the heat was 100 degrees, 37 Celsius. We get out of the store, Gatorades in hand, and about to hit the hot dog joint when we hear a baby crying. No big deal, we thought, until it hit one of my buddies, let's call him Ethan, who said it sounded a bit muffled. So we move our eyes around the area until one of my other buddies, Marcus, spots 2 babies in a car, in obvious distress, in 100 effing degree weather, with no parent. They were strapped to their baby seats, screaming, red-faced. We of course try the doors, but it's locked. Ethan, then without even thinking, decides to draw attention while Marcus begins to call the police. I start screaming for someone to grab something that I can smash the window with. When given to me, I did what I needed to do and I shattered the driver's side window. Coincidentally, at the same time, Karen walks out and she drops her things and then she charges at me and shoves me to the ground, attempting to mount and assault me in the middle of an effing crowd. My friend Ethan and a few other bystanders break it up. The dialogue's a bit shaky, considering all this happened so fast, but it goes something like this. Karen basically screams, "No, don't let him steal my stuff. My kids are in the car." My friend Marcus says, What are you talking about, lady?" I say to her, "You left your kids in a hot car at 100 effing degrees." Karen's not having it. She attempts to slap me and she says, "Do not cuss at me. I went inside to grab what I needed and I wasn't even 5 minutes. And you punks smashed my windows. To do what? Rob me and kidnap my children? I should call the cops." That's when I begin to explain and I say a lot can happen in 5 minutes. You can't just... She then interrupts me and says, "They were fine where they were. You idiots woke them up from their naps. Now I have to deal with crying all the way home." By this point, a couple of bystanders have the children out of the car. And that's when another bystander steps in, and the bystander says, "Ma'am, them crying all the way home is better than what could have happened. You're damn well lucky they didn't go into eternal napping." That's when Karen says, "Like you give a damn about my kids and if they're alive or not. This idiot," pointing to me, "could have possibly taken my kids and none of you did anything. Call the police." Now, Karen's visibly pissed, but she calms down when she's told the police are coming. She's also arguing with a couple of other bystanders as Ethan tries to help me calm down as I'm still fuming at this. Once the police arrive, Karen's already on the case. The cop approaches and says, "What's the problem?" And Karen says, "This idiot," pointing to me again, "tried to kidnap my children. He smashed my car windows. I witnessed it as I was leaving the store. I want to press charges and have him thrown in jail." That's when I say, "What the F? I did not try to take your kids." I then say, "Officer, she left them in the car in this type of heat." And luckily, Marcus and Ethan were there to back me up. But apparently, it did not satisfy this bitch of a mom. So the cops went to all the stores possible that had a camera. One camera showed, clear as day, that my buddies and I saw the children in distress, and then a crowd being drawn and me breaking into the car. The final nail in the coffin was when the children were escorted out of the car, and once it was proven that the car belonged to the mother and my squad was acting on valid and reasonable intent, she was arrested, but not before having a fit, trying to assault me and cuss at me, and watching herself being dragged away from her kids. I was also asked if I wanted to press charges on the woman for assault, but I didn't press charges because in the end, it was about the kids rather than me. However, with that said, the woman has to deal with the consequences of her actions. The woman ended up pleading guilty to 2 counts of child endangerment, and she's been sentenced to 4 years in prison for child endangerment and attempted assault brought on by the state. And the children are staying with their father. Guys, OP's definitely the hero in this situation. Him and his friends. And really, it doesn't matter what the situation is, guys, hot day or not. Young children, especially those who are still in need of car seats and are strapped helplessly to the car seats, should never be left alone in a vehicle, ever. Super duper crappy parenting on Karen's part. Like, she didn't want to wake her snoozing kids because she'd have to deal with it, so she left them in a hot car to go shopping. Way to go, Karen. And who actually believes she was in the store for less than 5 minutes? Nobody. So after dialysis today, I went to the local supermarket to get something for lunch and dinner. Of course, it's packed and there's entitled behavior everywhere. I just limp around as fast as I can because I'm tired, hungry, and hurting. I get the items to the self-service till and start scanning my items, and that's when I get flagged for a basket check. The poor girls on duty here are run off their feet, so I just wait while the lineup gets longer. And that's when I suddenly get tapped on my shoulder and there's a pissed off looking woman, maybe 45 years old, and she screams, "Move it! Your till has reset!" Indeed, it's gone back to the start screen due to the wait, and she carries on grumbling at me to move. The woman then gets a hold of my left arm and she squeezes hard to try to force me to move. I basically yell in pain, and a staff member runs over and says, "Back up, he's gotta be basket checked." Karen carries on whining and she lets go, but once she does, blood trickles down my sleeve. The staff member looks at me and says, "Hey, you need to go sit down on that bench there, I'll call a first aider." I'm already putting pressure on it as I know what's happened. My left arm has a surgical fistula for dialysis. Basically, they join an artery and a vein into one blood vessel, and bleeding from this can be potentially fatal if not dealt with. I take my hoodie off with help, while Karen continues to whine, screaming because security won't let her leave. Staff member then sees my arm. It's very swollen in sections from the treatment. When the woman squeezed, she ripped the scab open, and pressure stops it, but it takes time. That's when I hear a familiar voice. It's my best friend. He's come in to do some shopping. He asked, "Are you okay?" I tell him I need a dressing kit. There's one in my car. So he nods, takes my keys, and asks where I'm parked. He returns a few minutes later with the pack, and with his and the staff member's help, I stop the bleeding fully. By this time, the cops have turned up, and yes, I'm pressing charges. I felt like crap all afternoon because of her. And as I type this, I'm not hurting from her grip, but my anxiety's off the charts and I'm shaking. I'm going to the clinic tomorrow and getting them to double check that she's not done any damage. And hopefully it's not caused an infection because I don't want sepsis. My sister's looking after me. I'll be okay once the reaction settles down, but by God, I was only there for 30 minutes and that BS happened. Edit to update. So not much has changed other than I'm in emergency with a mystery infection now. I do feel lousy. The woman will be charged, but it could be a month or so before trial at best. Probably longer. And this is why you don't go grabbing people, Karen. And I'm glad OP decided to press charges on the woman because that's the only way they learn. But guys, OP does come back with an update and it's absolutely wild. The update says, basically, I ended up with a staph infection. My fistula failed. The infection, for some reason, caused my left knee to blow up like a balloon. It's extremely painful, and I needed 3 cases of fluid drain. And then, on top of that, an injection of steroids to reduce the swelling. I now have dialysis via chest line, which is less effective, so my fatigue and general health is worse. Karen's been charged, and she goes to court at the end of the month. She's been charged with assault causing bodily harm, assault, and public disorder. When her lawyer contacted mine, she basically had said that she was having a bad day and she feels terrible. Tesco, the supermarkets, banned her. The woman is also basically begging for forgiveness as her own lawyers told her that she's in deep crap. I told my lawyer that she may be sorry, but I don't care. Her behavior has had a negative impact on my health and day-to-day life. The judge can throw the book at her. And what's grinding me the most is the surgeon stated that my fistula was already on its way to failing, which means the compensation is probably not as high as it could be. What she did has left me in increased daily pain, with limited mobility even further, and sent my mental health into a downward spiral. Karen, I hope you get the maximum jail time for this. And maybe then you learn to be a better effing human. Yeah, that's the thing, guys. Like, everyone has bad days here and there, but that's no excuse to throw a temper tantrum and then get physical with someone, and then cry about it when you have to face the consequences. So our next door neighbor is building a swimming pool, and she's asked multiple times if she could cut down a tree on our property. Every time she's asked, she's been told no. Well, 2 days ago, when she was having other trees in her yard cut down, I left the house for about an hour to take my dogs to a walk in the park, and then came home to her tree service cutting down our tree. They managed to cut down many major branches and have destroyed the tree. Aside from looking ridiculous, the tree will now likely die. It's a 150-year-old oak tree that's the focal point of our backyard, and it provides shade for our backyard and deck. The tree service has told us that they were given instructions and were paid to cut down this tree, and that our neighbor had told them that the owners of the tree, us, had given them permission for it to be done. The tree service would not give us their names or contact information for homeowners insurance, and I believe they're acquainted with our neighbor in some way. Our neighbor says that the tree service was confused and they did it by mistake. I believe they're both lying. If the tree service believed we had given permission, they would not have moved their machinery onto our driveway to begin cutting the tree down as soon as we left. They stopped in the middle of cutting down another tree in our neighbor's yard to take ours down. And this gets more complicated because when the tree service would not give us their information to pass to our insurance, I called to file a police report. The officer came and wouldn't listen to our story. He said he couldn't do anything and wrote a report. I believe they've trespassed, committed an act of willful property damage and vandalism, but our town's police are unwilling to pursue the situation. We're going to file a civil suit because I want this slimy, spoiled liar to go through hell, and I have the time and money to do so. Holy moly, guys. So yeah, OP needs to contact an arborist and a lawyer and take that neighbor down because what she did was such an a-hole move, and what a mistake on her part. Guys, I've read stories where people cut down trees without permission, and it gets really, really expensive, and it's a huge no-no. And I believe once OP files the suit and everything's said and done, Karen's gonna have to kiss that swimming pool and possibly her house goodbye. Because destroying a 150-year-old tree, I can't imagine that not being expensive. And the Karen in the next post learns that the hard way, guys. So here's some background information. We live in an old and big manor that's split into 3 attached houses. The houses are about 150 years old and were built around 5 giant sequoias, which are 200 years old. In the UK, giant sequoias are very rare, and the 2 in our garden upped the house price by about £60,000. We live next to 2 really nice neighbors, 1 young couple and 1 old couple. Unfortunately, the old neighbors passed away, so their child and her family moved in. Let's call her Jo. Now, Jo was instantly a pain in the ass, as we'd been sharing chickens with the previous neighbors. Jo agreed to keep sharing them. However, on her nights, she would constantly forget to put them away, so we would have to check them every night anyways. One night, her brats thought it would be funny to open our personal duck pen in the night, which leads to a mass slaughter. Later, the chickens went the same way. About 2 years ago, there was a storm, and one of our sequoias somehow fell over and died. They were distraught, understandably. But from then on, the jealousy started. She would constantly complain how lucky we were to have 2 sequoias in our garden, and how our sequoia was making way too much shade in their garden. It wasn't. Anyways, we thought it was Jo being a pain. There were a few dry threats, like they would chop it down or maybe the next storm will blow it down. Until we came back from a holiday to France to find a 6-meter stump and nothing else. I mean, how the F do you get rid of a 100-foot tree in like 2 weeks? My mom and sisters were crying and my dad was red in the face, and we had no evidence that Jo had done it. She claimed that there was a storm and she had to get rid of it. We were then given an £8,000 bill for damages to her property, and to have the tree chopped up and removed. The wood alone would have been worth a small fortune. We had lost all hope, and 2 weeks had passed when my dad comes running in from the garden. We had put up a wildlife camera a few months ago, and it caught everything. So we got a lawyer on the phone. We also got a tree surgeon who said it was an original specimen brought into the UK in the 1860s. There were 218 around the UK, but only 60 now. He also told us to call an engineer because the roots might be in the foundation. So when they rot, it could damage the house. And it turns out we would need to redo the foundations. So with that, we take Jo to court and we sue them for damage to property, trespassing, and lots of other small claims. It would cost £250,000 to have another sequoia that was 200 years old put in, which was basically impossible. The damage to the foundation was another £200,000, along with the 2 oaks, which were another £25,000. So with the smaller claims, it went to about £500,000, which is $700,000, and they had to move out. We then used that money to pay off the mortgage, done a lovely loft and kitchen conversion, and have basically renovated the house and garden, as well as plant a 60-year-old sequoia tree in the back garden. We now have a lovely new family living next to us, who we share chickens, ducks, and pygmy goats with. They're very nice, and I make a fortune babysitting their kids. See, there you go guys, an entitled, jealous neighbor makes the biggest mistake of her life and basically bankrupts the family and has to move. And the funny part is, she had it chopped down and had the audacity to hand OP's family a bill for it. I'm glad she got what she deserved in the end. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our / entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode of the channel, I'll link it right here, guys. Go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.